The American Geophysical Union is a global community supporting more than 500,000 advocates and professionals in the earth and space sciences. The AGU remains committed to collaboration and community, and today, AGU TV is showcasing how.
Welcome to AGU 23.
This is AGU TV,
where today we are focusing on
Wide open
community.
Welcome back. I'm Laura Krantz, and today we are highlighting how important the role of community is to the study of Earth and space science.
Straight ahead, we will explain the correlation between climate change and mental health.
And I can't wait to introduce you to a project putting community at the forefront as scientists map air pollution and other environmental health risks.
Plus, the new push by AGU to cultivate diversity and inclusion in the geosciences.
The emphasis on open science has helped to create awareness of the critical role that equity and environmental justice has in its principle and practice. We take a deep dive straight ahead.
You can find the latest AGU TV episode on the TVs placed throughout the convention center, on the in-house channels at several of our partner hotels, on the homepage of the AGU website, and on our YouTube channel and on X, formerly known as Twitter. Shen-Yu, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So tell me about Riskware, this project that you're working on in Georgia.
Riskware is a community science project supported by AGU's Thriving Earth Exchange. We work with a community in Adel, Georgia. The community is very concerned about a potential establishment of wood pellet plant in the area because the proposal of that factory took a lot of shortcuts in terms of EPA regulations and due processes in policymaking. So the community were very concerned and decided to reach out to AGU and see if it can hire or connect with scientists to work together with them to build a network to monitor the air qualities in their neighborhood and increase the awareness of environmental health risks in the community.
Okay. And you said this is part of one of the Thriving Earth Exchange projects. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that is?
Thriving Earth Exchange is AGU's powerhouse of community science. It connects communities with scientists, project managers, and other people who are interested in community science project and want to turn their expertise into an influence in the real world.
So they get to take the science that they're doing all this work on and then have a practical application for it out in society.
Exactly.
How does this community collaboration help with the kind of science that you're working on?
It's very important to do field work and connect with people you're working with. So as a geospatial and remote sensing expert in training, I do very little field work, which might be okay for my own research, but it's not okay for community science projects like this. So when I was in the field, I was able to experience the community, listen to their concerns, understand their life, and so that I will have a better understanding on how people actually living and what your scientific findings may have an impact on the community. If that's the case, do you think that's the right way to the community will benefit from? Or is this something pushed towards the community very condescendingly from up above? So I was able to use this experience to reward my, just to benefit my own research instead of just always thinking the data. It's actually very important to go to the field, understand the city area, not just from satellite images, not just from Google Street Views, but also it's very important to really experience that and have that immersive experience is very important. It's going to help you discover something you will not be able to realize if you're just looking at the data.
Yeah. So communication is obviously then very important to this kind of work. Open science, making sure people find it accessible, other scientists, the people you're working with. How does coming to a big meeting like AGU 23 help kind of push forward what you're doing?
AGU is definitely a hub of science. It connects people. It connects people from various different type of backgrounds. And this is the best way to see the top level of science and talk with people you really don't really have connection with. This is so-called weak connection. I've heard this a lot. It can help people, especially those in the early career, to build more connections and empower them through potential collaborations and new ideas. I think that's the best way to stay connected and attend AGU and communicate a lot with fellow scientists, even if you don't know them.
Yeah, I can imagine. What advice would you have for new scientists about engaging with and contributing to community science?
I would say be open to an alternative answer to a question. Be critical about things you're reading, and try to get the word out and spread the word as early as you can. Publish in a journal, publish in scientific journals can be a good option, but blogging, submitting to a student newspaper, and attending interviews like this would be a very great experience as well.
Shenyu Jia, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you so much.
Now we turn to you. We talk with attendees today to hear just how important the AGU community is to you.
I think community and collaboration go hand in hand, and so it's really important to have meetings like AGU to be able to connect with people in the community that maybe don't necessarily do exactly what I do, but being able to bounce ideas off of people really creates that sense of community and scientific advancement.
A lot of science, I think, is grounded in community problems and trying to solve these community problems. So without the community, I think there wouldn't be really the true driving force of science at the end of the day.
Community science is important, especially with the history of science, how it has been a predominantly white male field, and there has never been this deep-rooted connection to the people who things like this impact the most. And I'm so happy that geosciences is now being so inclusive.
It's important to engage in a community in science because you can really work together as an entire group to come up with new ideas, new approaches, and new ways of looking at things, and really listen to other members of your community.
Science is important for humans because it's going to give us a lot of insights about our universe.
Answering questions that haven't really been answered before, questions where there's no answer before you start looking sometimes, and you find out unexpected things.
The coolest thing about science is that one discovery today could be a lot tomorrow.
We as a scientist, we share ideas and try to solve different problems, and we come back and share those solution to those problems that you are actually helping society to progress through time. It is exciting thing about science.
Without science, we wouldn't have such beautiful images of space, or even the buildings that we have today, our cities, our roads, everything. We wouldn't have this wonderful environment that we're working so hard to protect. Science is truly beautiful.
George Matsumoto works at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, MBARI, in California. He's interested in invertebrates that live in the open ocean and the deep sea, but he's also interested in the education of a certain vertebrate on land. He's currently the Senior Education and Research Specialist at MBARI, and as part of that work, he's been advocating for increased diversity, equity, and inclusion in the science world. George, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
My pleasure. It's a beautiful morning here in San Francisco.
Yes, it is. So, one of the things that you're interested in is diversity, equity, and inclusiveness in the world of science. How do you explain these concepts to people who might not be familiar with them?
That's a really good question. So, oftentimes they're words that have become very controversial, and I don't think they should be. Essentially, what it means is that we want science to be as representative as possible of the community that we represent, which is the human race. And science should be representative of all the people that live on this earth.
There's been a little bit of pushback on this, as you were kind of mentioning. And, how do you sort of get the scientific community to rally around these ideas? And what are some of the strategies that are being taken to be like, hey, this really is valuable, not just from a moral or an ethical standpoint, but from like a science standpoint?
Yes, and that's exactly the path to take, because scientists are logical, we're very linear, and so we like to look at the facts, so to speak. And the facts are fairly simple. The more people you have and the more diverse opinions and thoughts and ideas you have, the stronger the science, the stronger the ideas, the stronger the experiments, the stronger the results. And so it really makes logical sense to be as inclusive as possible and bring in as many different viewpoints as you can. And a great example is indigenous knowledge. The indigenous peoples who used to live in all the different areas of the world have an immense wealth of knowledge that we should be tapping. And we're starting to, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you can give some more examples like this, and then especially, given your own work with MBARI, maybe tell people what that stands for and how you're working on these DEI issues within your organization.
Absolutely. So MBARI, the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, is a nonprofit research organization based in Monterey, California.
Not affiliated with the museum.
Not affiliated. Well, we're partnered with the Monterey Bay Aquarium, but we're separate. And we do work trying to combine science and engineering to better explore and understand the ocean, which is huge. So it's not a simple problem. The idea of being more diverse and inclusive in our staff and our ideas is very important for MBARI. And we're addressing this in a number of different ways, including internal things like having an internal charge account so that when our staff spend time on DEI issues, we actually have an account they could charge their time to. And that's important because sometimes supervisors don't like to have their personnel working on things that are not direct project related. To larger things, like we just donated our large research vessel, the research vessel Western Flyer, to the Florida Institute of Oceanography, where it'll be used for education and research, focusing mostly on students that have been previously underrepresented in science. And so from small things to large things, we're trying to make a difference in the field of ocean science.
Yeah, and can you talk a little bit about how this fits in with the overall AGU landing program and what some of their goals are?
Thank you for asking, because I forgot to mention that. The AGU landing program has been so important in my journey and my path for the last 2 years. I was fortunate enough to be part of cohort 1, so we're just ending our 2-year program. And what the landing program has provided is an immense basis of support, training, learning, and probably more important, the network, the community of others to help support me and the institution on our journey. It's not an easy journey. As you said, there is sometimes resistance. And having the support of others in similar or even completely different situations is really comforting. And unfortunately, DEIA is not a topic that is limited to just ocean sciences. It is across all the sciences. And so it's easier to find a community. And our cohort 1, which only had, I think, 3 ocean scientists in it, of the 12, has been so important in my pathway.
Cool. George Matsumoto, thanks so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking.
We turn now to the University of Virginia's Environmental Institute, which stands at the forefront of environmental research and community engagement. Let's see how they are educating communities through two-way dialogues that ensure academic insights translate into actionable solutions at the local level.
The Environmental Institute at the University of Virginia is a hub of interdisciplinary research, training, and partnerships that are focused on connecting our research with policy and practice.
The mission of the Institute is to build and support teams that can address some of these grand challenges that we have as a society that are related to environmental change and climate.
Climate change is one of the most existential threats to society and to our future. I really think that this need is incredibly urgent, and that's why I'm excited about bringing the research out into communities who need the research. And I think in the end it's about, real communities and real people, that climate change is real, but so are the solutions.
The realities of climate change can at times feel overwhelming. The damage affects our ecosystems, economies, and communities, but also our mental health. Daniel Dodgen is a senior advisor with the Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And he explains the relationship between climate change and mental health and why it is important to address. Daniel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tell us about this relationship between mental health and climate change. Why is this important to think about?
Well, I think it's important for a couple of reasons. First off, health and mental health are inseparable, so anything that affects our health affects our mental health. And we know a little bit more about the specific effects of climate change on mental health because of some of the great research that people have been doing in the last few years.
For a lot of people, it's obvious that climate change, there's more particulate matter, and then you have problems with your lungs, or vectors of disease can live at different places than they used to, which spreads those diseases further. But mental health, I don't know if people are as familiar with those concepts.
It's a great question, and I would say there's 4 basic things that are helpful to know. 1, extreme weather events have significant psychological impacts. 2, extreme heat in particular causes very high rates of mortality and morbidity for people who are suffering some kind of mental illness. 3, what we might call eco-anxiety, or the threat of climate, has a significant impact on people. And 4th, that impact is going to be disproportionate. It's not going to affect everybody equally.
And I think it's also worth noting here that, the communities that are most affected by climate change are often disadvantaged. It's elderly, it's children, it's people who are living in poverty, or often communities of color. Are they also disproportionately affected by mental health issues?
100%. And I think it's helpful to think probably in 2 large categories. One is people that we already know are disproportionately impacted by so many things in our country due to inequity, right? So communities of color, as you said, seniors and children, often disproportionately impacted. Seniors in particular, extreme heat is very difficult for them, which then can create additional anxiety. The other group that's important to think about is people whose livelihood or lifestyle are very closely connected to the land. That might be tribal communities, it might be farmers, it might be people in rural communities, but when you're closely connected to the land because of, like I said, culture or work, then climate change is going to have a disproportionate impact on you because it's going to impact every other aspect of your life too. So of course, the psychological or mental health impacts would also be more extreme for those groups.
Yeah. Are you finding that being here at AGU 23, you're able to sort of talk pretty openly with a lot of people about this and get a good positive response about how you're trying to address these issues?
I think because of COVID and all we've gone through in the last couple of years, people are much more aware of how these large-scale events that impact everybody impact our mental health, because we've all seen it. We've all seen what it's like to be stuck in your house for months at a time. Imagine in an extreme weather event in the future what that's going to be like. We all know what it did to our children and our own mental health to not be able to go out, not go to restaurants, not be able to be in public spaces. That could be part of our future. Doesn't have to be though, of course, and we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the community in general seems to be extremely important to getting through these kinds of events, as we learned with COVID. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of community going forward?
As you said, certainly from what we learned during COVID and other kinds of events, connection to community turns out to be really important in helping people recover more quickly and sort of recover better in the sense of achieving more whatever it was that was lost during the event. And I'm talking about extreme weather events like floods, hurricanes, etc. One of the things that's really exciting about the new National Climate Assessment, known as NCA-5, is that there's a lot of hope in the document, even though it talks about the many negative potential events that are going to happen as a result of consequences of climate change, and there is a lot. It also gives some examples of things that are happening at the community level, where people are working to mitigate the impact of climate change or to better adapt to climate change. And I think anything that gives people hope, right, that allows people to be part of the solution isn't just going to help us deal with climate change, it's actually going to help our mental health. So I think there's positive things in the NCA 5 that might also give us some ideas of things we can do that can not only help climate change, but can help our mental health.
It's good to end on a positive note here. Daniel Dodgen, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Laura.
To Texas we go, where Southeast Texas and areas across the Gulf region are subject to extreme events such as flooding, air pollution, and heat. In order to address these issues, the Southeast Texas Urban Integrated Field Laboratory is using interdisciplinary collaboration with communities to address climate challenges.
The Southeast Texas Urban Integrated Field Lab is about addressing acute and chronic stressors and compounding hazards that are affecting communities in Southeast Texas. It's a collaborative project among 4 Texas institutions and Oak Ridge National Lab.
By partnering national laboratories with local academic institutions, we can bring large national capabilities and resources to solve problems that are identified by local communities and task forces. This community-driven approach is critical to study the impacts of climate change on real people in real cities like Port Arthur and Beaumont in this project.
Southeast Texas UIFL is about making an impact and making a change and making sure that we empower Southeast Texas communities in developing adaptation strategies for future climate. It's also important to know that the challenges that are experienced here are very similar to other parts of the Gulf region and also other parts of the United States. And so the solutions that we will develop here will be helpful to other communities elsewhere.
Open science is the idea that science should be collaborative, diverse, and open to everyone. So how do we make sure that this idea is implemented? To find out, we're joined by Sydney Nuger. She's the coordination and analysis lead with NASA's Capacity Building Program. Thank you for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about open science. What does this term mean to you?
Open science means a lot more than what some people would expect. A lot of times you think open source science, free data, free tools, free ways to analyze that data, and it's all, well documented. But open science is also about inclusion, so making sure science is open and available to everyone in whatever way they want to participate. So we think about it also like inclusion.
So, and when you say inclusion, are we talking scientists in different fields? Are we talking about people who have never opened a science textbook in their life? When you say inclusion, what do you mean?
Yes to all of those things, including people across the whole entire system. So we have all these scientists that are doing really great work that's really has a lot of applications and uses in the real world. And then the people that are actually making decisions, these people aren't always really well connected. And then the people that are impacted by those decisions, it needs to be open and available so that people along this whole chain can participate in whatever way they're able to, because all the work really affects each one of us, especially when we're dealing with big challenges like in earth science.
So how do you implement something like this? Because I imagine it involves sort of a shift in mindset, especially for scientists who have done things a certain way for a long time, and all of a sudden now they're having to think about making their science more approachable, more inclusive, more, available.
Yeah, definitely. Part of it is just bringing in some new teams that can help do that bridging. Because it's not like what we did in the past doesn't work anymore. All that still works. It's just that we want to make it more connected. So bringing in more teams to help bridge the gaps in the different communities is one of our primary ways we're doing this.
Diversity, equity, inclusion, I imagine these are all part of what you're talking about. And these are topics that are kind of coming under attack as of late. What are you doing to kind of preserve and protect these ideas as you're doing open science, against any sort of pushback or blowback?
Yeah, definitely. These are core values that NASA holds, and that means that all folks at NASA also hold these core values. So we're trying to integrate it into science in any way we can. One example is through inclusion plans. So whenever you write a solicitation to do a project now with NASA, you're going to be writing an inclusion plan along with it for many of our programs to talk about how you're practicing inclusion in your own science teams. And that's going to look differently for everybody, but making sure we have acceptable plans in place so that we are supporting inclusion even where we aren't able to work with our NASA teams.
And you're doing a session on environmental justice and earth sciences while you're here at AGU 23. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So NASA has a lot of earth science products and tools that can help people make decisions wherever it is they live. And we're trying to, again, do that kind of connecting piece, making sure that our tools and our science are able to help everyone equally. So in places that have previously been underserved by science and maybe even overexploited by gathering data and having no real work to help create solutions, we're trying to go and remedy some of that. New projects, new tools and partnerships, working directly with community organizations and providing funding to those organizations to make sure the science is something they can implement and have, for a long time within those communities. That's the goal of all our environmental justice work at NASA. And so we have some of our investigators coming in to talk about how that implementation has looked in the past year.
And what are you hoping people are going to take away from this session?
The session is a bit unique. We have some kind of topics that I think a lot of people won't have ever heard about at AGU. So for example, the environmental landscape around prisons. That's not something I've heard about at AGU before, but that's going to be in this session. So I hope people think a little bit differently about the kind of science that NASA does, that NASA supports.
Open science also seems to suggest that everybody is part of a big community, and it's not just, having the degree that says I am a scientist, but also sharing ideas and feeling included and feeling part of things. Can you tell us a little bit about the importance of community to the work you're doing?
Definitely. Part of what we're doing is we respect all the communities that already exist and want to connect with them wherever it is they're at. So even if you don't have a degree in science, we want to bring in all kinds of teams, interdisciplinary teams. Sociologists that we have presenting at AGU for the very first time, for example, are leading some of these teams. So we want to really connect with communities where they exist based on their own values and really help them feel like they are seen and part of NASA.
Sydney Nuger, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
That's a wrap on day 2 of AGU TV. We've enjoyed sharing the many ways the AGU community is supporting and promoting space and earth sciences, and how important that community is to you. You can find the latest AGU TV episode on the TVs placed throughout the convention center, on the in-house channels at several of our partner hotels, on the homepage of the AGU website, and on our YouTube channel and on X, formerly known as Twitter. We are only halfway through this exciting week here in San Francisco. Join us right back here tomorrow as we talk about the importance of connection to the AGU community. Until then, have a great one.